Okay, I believe we're on, so let's get started. We'll probably wait. I'll probably kill a little bit of a few seconds here, maybe another minute or so, just to let people who are late join us. But this is the third of our 5-week series on the business value of RPA with me and Valentina. Say hi, Valentina.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
I am again joining us from Atlanta, which is rare. 3 weeks in a row, I'm in the same city. And V is in Medellin, and she is out of our Medellin center, although working from home today. And so we're looking forward to it. Today's topic is going to be realizing the promise of RPA, a strategic and structured approach. It's kind of building on last week where we talked about a bottom-up approach, top-down approach, and then trying to get to a hybrid method or model. So this is somewhat of a hybrid model, and it walks through the different steps and processes and things you need to do to scale RPA across an organization. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Looking forward to it. If you have questions, you can type them in at any time, or at the end we'll have a Q&A process. All right. As we said, realizing the promise of RPA, a strategic and structured approach. Thank you for joining us. Again, this is Tommy Simon. I'm president of our RPA business and Team International. And Valentina Artiga, which is product owner of RPA, and particularly of our catalogs, which we're going to get into later in the month. And she's product owner down in Medellin. Okay, so someone was asking me to kind of better lay out kind of what our RPA value proposition is, right? And so we kind of came up with this as a value map, if you will. So what is the value of RPA? It's improved business outcomes by incorporating intelligent smart bots into legacy processes. So how do you get improved business outcomes? Well, lower costs, lower administrative costs would certainly be one. Improved staff productivity, capturing missed revenue opportunities and reduced risk and improved decision making. And then we have some examples of each one. And I actually have this blown out even further where we actually have real life examples, case study, each one. So reduced errors in network, we have a couple of case studies with the actual returns that were improved. So if you're interested in that, just ask us and we can give you the whole full blown map. But for most people, this will work. So let's just take them one at a time. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but lower administrative costs is certainly one of the big reasons, right? We want to reduce transaction cycles, cost per transactions, and so automation is a great way to do that, right? Also, the cost of reduced errors and is a big hidden cost in a lot of organizations, and by automating it, you can reduce those errors as well as those costs, and that'll come up across a lot of these different value props. Improve staff productivity. I would tell you the majority of our clients, this is probably their biggest thing, right? They're not looking to replace headcount. What they're looking to do is automate their headcount or automate the process so that they can take their people, the people that they've invested time, energy, and training into, and get them to do higher value tasks, to get them to maybe move into a different position where they don't have to hire somebody new, and they have a lower training threshold because that person already knows the company, the people, et cetera, right? So I would say that's probably the number one area. Val, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Honestly, like a few days ago, someone asked me like, what's the selling point of RPA? Because I don't want our company or our employees to think that we're gonna start, firing people or that robots are going to replace them. And so that was exactly my answer. So it's not that you're replacing people, it's not that you're reducing your staff, it's just that you're getting productivity gains. So that's your selling point. You're removing mundane tasks from their job so they can focus on value added activities.
Yeah, another hidden in there is like nobody wants to do boring, routine jobs that you don't have to think. I shouldn't say nobody, but the vast majority of us doesn't. Anybody who has, who loves challenges and wants to take on new challenges. We hate to do the routine, and pretty soon we get bored with it and we start making mistakes, right? And pretty soon after that, if that's all we're going to do, we go find another job, right? And so both in lower administrative costs and improved staff productivity, that, losing people impacts both of those. Typically, you're going to have to hire somebody at a higher rate in a lot of cases. You're going to have to hire somebody who's going to have to learn the organization. It's not going to be high, very productive, right? So, losing, and increasing or improving retention rates of your employees can have significant effects to the bottom line. So, all right, let's talk about missing revenue opportunities. This is the one I like, because when we find this, we are almost guaranteed to do work, right? Because everybody needs more revenue. And so, and RPA can help with that, whether that's, identifying with AI, kind of identifying opportunities. For example, in medical coding, we have a bot that will go out and look at what the optimized codes to use and actually predict what percentage they will be accepted by the insurance companies, whether 90% or 30%. And then so medical companies can go out and optimize their billing. That's just one example. I worked with a client today, just signing a new project with a client today, because they have something like $12 million in one of their divisions that are outside of 90 days, and they have a lot of manual reconciliations, and it just slows the process to get the invoice out, and then it just kind of delays, and so it kind of cascades from there. So they want to automate that whole reconciliation and invoicing process, to take that from 12 million to maybe 5 or 6 million, if we can reduce it in half, just by doing automation of a lot of the manual tasks, which slow things down. So revenue is definitely one that we look to find. Another one, there's another company, they can do audits, but the problem is they don't have enough man hours to do all the audits they can, but they can bill for the audits. So how can they do more audits and increase billing with the same headcount? So we're going to look at what we can't automate all of the audit, but we can automate about 70% of the audit. And in that case, give them, 2/3 more capability, and then be able to, what's going to turn into about 2,500 new audits a month, which they're going to make somewhere around $100 to $125 an audit, right? So that's a pretty significant number for one buy, right? And then another big one is that people don't really look at, but is a real driver in a lot of organizations that expand RPA, is reduced risks, right? So it can be reduced risk from compliance. Again, we talked about errors and how errors can cause issues, and particularly in compliance, and cause penalties and fees and other things, right? So that's certainly one area. Another area is just because there's tribal knowledge in the organization. We have one company that's we're working with to do month-end close of their financials. They have 2 people that spend about 300 hours a month closing their systems, their different systems. We have another insurance company that we're talking about that has 60 books they got to close, right? And so each department does their own close, and it rolls up into one close. But there's tribal knowledge. Nobody knows how to do that across any other of the other units. And therefore, they're coming to us, not because it's necessarily the biggest ROI, or even though there's going to be a positive ROI, but they're coming to us because the risk if some of these people leave, they're screwed. They don't know how to close their books. It's going to cause some real issues for a few months. So they want to reduce that risk. So that's a very common one that we, and then of course, I think in all of them, improved decision making. It's part of digital transformation. And so, the more that you automate something, digitize it, automate it, now you can start doing analysis on it. If you can start doing analysis, you can start uncovering why. If you start uncovering why, you can start predicting. If you can start predicting, you could probably start prescribing and actually changing and tweaking things to optimize and get the best performance. But it all starts with digitization and the analysis that you can do to understand why. So I think that's a for a lot of organizations, that's a key driver. Val, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I just want to say that for decision making, I think that that's a really good point, because there are a lot of things that are being implemented today to enhance that decision making within companies. So like once you have your process digitized, you could start using AI, machine learning, BI, a lot of things to increase your process capacity and being able to provide new additional insights that weren't there before, and therefore improve your decision making and have reliable data in real time. So that's a really good point. I think that that's something that should be considered always when we're doing RPA.
Good, thank you, Val. All right, so why a top-down implementation? We talked last week that you could do bottom-up, top-down, and or a hybrid. And really, top-down is you're starting at the top-down, but it's still going to be a hybrid model, right? You've got to get, as we said last week, you have to do both bottom-up and top-down at the same time. But if you're going to get scale, you're going to need to do a top-down approach, right? So a top-down is typically more strategic. I chose these words very on purpose because this is what is lacking in a lot of the bottom up approaches, right? Overall strategy and overall structure, right? And so why a top down approach? Because it's strategic, right? We want to align goals with the direction of the business. We could go in and start doing a bunch of automation that's going to have an ROI, but if we're taking resources and time and investments that should be maybe aligned with the direction of the company, then even though we're getting a positive ROI, it could be harmful to the company, or it could not be, may not yield the results the company's looking to do. So you need to make sure, when you start doing these initiatives, that these initiatives follow what are the key 2 or 3 objectives that the company has, and then make sure that we're kind of following up on that, and then all our ROI and all our feasibility and all our roadmaps are in line with what's coming out of the company objectives and roadmap. The second thing is, from a strategic standpoint, is we want to create significant returns. We're not trying to. It's not that we want to do 5 bots and have $10,000 a month in savings or $50,000 a month in savings. And a lot of these large organizations, and this goes to number 3 as well too. What you want to do is set a strategic goal where you say, okay, hey, look, you're a $1 billion company. You have 250 million in SG&A or G&A. We want to cut 10% of that SG&A out a year, or maybe it's 5%. Let's say 5%. So that's still 12,500 a year on an ongoing basis. So we want to set that goal. We want to set that priority so that we get real, true, definable, and measurable business value. We set goals, we measure those goals, and we can justify or show what the overall justification would be. And let me just make this point, because it comes up a lot. RPA is like, I use an example of a tanker. You could buy a tanker for $1 million and put 10 barrels of oil on it, right? And your cost would be $100,000 a barrel, right? That's not very cost effective, right? You buy the same tanker and you could put 1 million barrels of oil on it, right? And it's a much cheaper, dollar a barrel. And so it becomes much cheaper. RPA is a lot of like that. You're going to spend time, you're going to spend training, you're going to spend research, you're going to then make investments, you're going to create a COE, you're going to buy tools. This is all pretty significant investment up front. If you're really going to get the most out of it, you need to be producing 300, 400, 500 bots or automation at an organization. So you spread that across every automation. Some people, we go into some companies and we do, that start with 1 or 2 bots, and they wonder why their cost per bot so high. Well, if you were doing 500, it would be much cheaper, but you're doing 2, right? And so you want to make sure that you have that, you're following that strategy, but you also want to make sure that you set goals to achieve the objectives that follow that strategy. So that's why it needs to be a strategic approach. From a structure standpoint, if you're going to do it across the organization, you're going to have 3, 4, 500 of them. You don't want to have the wild, wild west. You want to enable people for sure, but you don't want it to be the wild, wild west. You need to have consistent standards, architecture, solution design, etc., so that it doesn't get unwieldy. You don't have tools different tools everywhere. Then your support costs get out of whack. None of them integrate with one of each other because you're using different tools. Because the real power of bots is when you start having bots interact with bots, right? That's when you know you're getting mature. I have bots that are working with 3 other bots doing a huge task, and so you need to be thinking that, so that's where your goal is in the future. And if you get that way, and you get to that point, then you don't have this problem of different architecture, different tools, different standards that are going to slow and impact the overall cost. And then again, you need to be able, because now you're going to be working across different departments, different companies, different divisions in some cases, right? You want to be able to make sure that you can evaluate and understand the ROI and the cost benefit analysis, in the same way, in the same manner, consistently across all of them, so that you can determine where you need to put your money in your investments, right? And of course, the last one is you want it to be structured so you can scale. Again, getting to that 3 to 500. If you fail to do that up front, when you start to scale, you're going to stop and start because you're going to run into a lot of issues. All right. So let's talk a little bit about key success. I'm sorry, Val, was there anything that you wanted to add on that previous slide?
No, Tommy, I just wanted to say that from a process perspective, it is also important to work on several projects at the same time, because you want to keep momentum, you want to keep your employees engaged with the RPA initiative, and you don't want it to die just with 1 or 2, because as we've mentioned before, when you start with one project, you get it delayed because you didn't get approval, or for any other reason you have a roadblock, and then if you don't have anything else to work on and to keep your employees engaged in all the RPA journey, then it starts to maybe momentum starts to decrease, and well, you might fail at your RPA journey. So that's another point also that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, great point. All right, so let's talk a little bit about key success factors, right? So I think one of the first ones is if you're going to do this at scale, right? I should have put key success factors at scale, right? If you're going to do this and not just have a couple divisions playing around with a few bots, you want to make this a core initiative, then you need a strong executive sponsor, right? It's a must. Without it, it's dead. So I think that has got to be the key thing. You've got to have a CFO, COO, sometimes CIO, but typically it's really business driven, either from the CFO or the COO, sometimes from the president or the CEO, but mostly it's CFO, COO, and they're driving it. They're setting the goals. They're mandating that the different departments, divisions, companies, groups within their purview meet with the COE and find keep a plan. And they're measuring it. They make it part of a strategic initiative where they measure it every week, and they follow up not just with their internal COE, but all the business owners during their regular checkups or status meetings. So I think that's probably more important than the other 10 combined. All right. The second one is the COE with proper authority levels. And what I mean by property authority levels is, I've seen some COEs that are kind of, well, we influence. Well, we set these goals and these targets, but there's really no accountability to us, right? And that goes back to having that executive sponsor. The COE needs to be I don't say the hammer, that's probably the wrong word, but they need to be the extension of the strong executive sponsor. They need to be the people who are out there doing the work, finding, making the analysis, and reporting back on the success of it, right? And without that strong sponsor behind the COE, they're going to be a weak and ineffective group. So I think having a COE, a COE, Center of Excellence, that has consistent standards, tools, policies, etc., is great, but without authority to make sure that those are enforced, without the authority to make sure that there's goal set and that people are trying to achieve those goals and doing the things necessary to get to those goals, then again, it's probably going to fail. As I just mentioned, setting goals across the organization is certainly a key, important aspect, right? So you will get what you ask to get. You will get what you set as a target, right? If you set a target at $500, you're going to get $500. If you set a target of 50 million, one way or another, you can find a way to get to 50 million. So setting up, you need to definitely set goals across the organization, by division, by department, by sectors, however you are divided your company up, but it needs to be granular down to the actual department levels. Anything that you want to add there? And actually, Val's going to be showing you a dashboard that we've created to help people do that. It's a very simple dashboard. We're just started building out. We're going to continue to build it out. But she's going to walk you through kind of a dashboard here at the end of this presentation. Val, anything you want to add there?
No, I think we're good, Tommy. You're covering everything.
All right. The fourth one's creating a schedule, right? So what do I mean by schedule, and what do I mean by the flexibility to go faster than plan? You're not going to get to, and I think our example, we said 250 million, so 10% SG&A, so 12.5 is 5%. We're going to try to get 12.5 million in savings. So you're not going to get that first year, right? That's not going to happen, but unless you put a massive team on there. But you'll probably, you could probably get there to 2 years or 3 years, right? And so you need to schedule. And then as part of that, you're going to go to all these different departments and talk to them about what their needs are. Well, you need to have a coordinated schedule across departments, groups, and teams, right? So that they know what to expect if they're expecting, if you get everybody excited and then they wait 8 months before the COE shows up to start working on anything, they've lost all excitement, all momentum, and frankly may go do it themselves, right? Which is the second part of that. You need, you create a coordinated schedule to communicate when everybody's going to get their returns. Some of them are going to be great with that schedule. Some of them are going to be like, that's not fast enough for me. I want to go faster. How do I go faster? And so you need to give them a plan where they can use some of their auxiliary budget to maybe bring in a different team, a SWAT team, if you will, or maybe you have some relationships with vendors. One of my clients is a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 company for retail and consumer spend. And so they've got 3 vendors that they have their team that's implementing a 3-year plan, but then they have their 3 vendors that if you want to go and pay out of your own budget, that you can do that and you can pick which one, but it has to be one of those 3. All right, because those 3 have been certified to understand the overall COE's processes, methods, etc. So you need to kind of have a coordinated schedule, but then you also need to give some options for people who want to go faster. Val, why don't you talk a little bit about the process champions and why that's so important?
Yeah, right. So I would personally, I think that between or within a company, within a department, within a function, first thing we've got to do is just try to identify this key process that is going to drive the benefit within the team and drive the benefit within the department, and it's going to give us a big, huge, or good business case. So to select that specific process and make it a champion, and that would be like our first initiative, our gate to start working, to start having conversations with management level or C-level. I think it's really important to identify the first process within our team. I don't know, Tommy, if you want to add something there.
Yeah, I'll just jump in a little bit. So,
Yep.
And to Val's point, once what we typically do when we work with each department, we identify a few processes. And then we kind of see which person is the person within that group that grasps it the quickest, right? or who gets more excited and motivated. You always find someone when you start doing this and you're working with different departments with or different people within a department. You can pretty quickly kind of see who naturally gets it and gets excited about it. And then you want to make that person a process champion. How do you make them a process champion? Well, you give them training, right? That's certainly one thing, which, with our clients, if they have training programs, great. If not, we have some specifically designed for our clients. You want to encourage that person. You want to try to create a reward program with that person to really take it and run. And why do you want to do that? And it comes down to number 6, the one after it, the target logical use cases that have significant ROI. It is the hardest part of RPA, is to be able to apply. RPA by itself is logical, and use cases are sometimes logical, but for some reason, trying to find enough use cases to justify or to keep a team busy is hard. It's hard when you get started. It's the single biggest reason why a lot of, like I think we said in the last deal, 85% of the companies have less than 10 use cases in production. Why? Is that because most companies don't have more than 10? No, it's because they just don't have the people to identify which processes would be great. And why is that? Well, because a lot of them don't understand RPA, or they're worried about RPA taking the job, and so they don't want to speak up and talk about, hey, we could automate this, and this, right? And so you've got to get to a point where you get enough logical use cases with enough ROI to keep a team busy, right? If you're going to scale to 300 or 500, that makes sense, right? You got to find 300 to 500 across the organization. And process champions are probably the biggest attribute in defining those use cases. So as you do that, then number 7 becomes more important, right? Which is you want to move into citizen development, right? For the easy processes. As these champions, you start seeing these champions, they're going to come up with some of them that don't have significant ROI. Doesn't mean they don't need to be done. They don't mean that there's not valid reasons to do them. Maybe it's reducing errors or compliance or reducing risk or et cetera, et cetera. And so for the ones that are pretty easy to do, you hope that you can build, you can get a couple of people within each department that understands the development tool easy enough to go out and build something, right? And so moving to a citizen development model, I see a lot of companies who want to do that, and unfortunately, a lot of the software companies are out there selling it. Hey, citizen model, a bot for everybody. Great, you're not going to start that way, and it's not going to happen, right? And so you want to build towards that model. It takes time to get to that model, and even then, I've not seen anybody do it really, really effectively yet. I've seen a few that are moving in, and I'm part of the Atlanta Automation group on the board. And a couple of companies here in Atlanta have had a lot more success than others I've seen. But even they will tell you that it's still in its infancy stage. So it is a good concept to move to, but it's hard to get to. And I would not encourage anyone to try to do that from day one. All right, and then if you're going to do the easy ones from citizen development, then it makes sense. You want to have kind of the COE and an enterprise team that manages all the complex enterprise level ones. And that's typically a mixture between BPM, like a K2 tool, with RPA. And so I'll just take a second to explain that, because I've had that conversation come up a couple of times this week. What's the difference between BPM and RPA? Do they overlap? Yes, they overlap, right? There's a lot of things that they overlap in. But the way I explain it is BPM is kind of enterprise tool where you have lots and lots of integrations, and you have lots of queues, and you may have some manual processes in there. You don't want a bot waiting in a queue for something to happen and it's just sitting there. That would be an ineffective time in the bot. So what you do is a BPM tool. Let's take an expense report. Everybody understands that. So you go out, you may have your own internal bot on your desktop that goes out to your credit cards and pulls in all the information and populates your expense report, right? I hear a lot of salespeople out there cheering for that, right? That was the first thing I did. So that's kind of step one. But then you know you still got to review it. You make your changes and you submit it. Well, that goes to your manager for a queue, right? Well, you don't want a bot waiting for that queue to happen, right? So the bot goes off and it does its other things. The BPM tool will wait, and it's kind of, you set it up as a workflow. Another thing that BPM does, works with forms a lot more. So you may have an expense report that's set in the queue, somebody goes and approved it. Now that may have to go to accounting, right? You can do that through integration through BPM, or if there's certain steps that need to be followed, you may get a bot to go input everything into the accounting system, then create an email, and then send that email off to somebody to approve, right? And then it goes back into another queue. So the BPM is kind of that overarching process with a lot of queues and a lot of manual steps. And then you have bots do all the tasks between each steps. That's kind of how I describe it best. Can you solve an expense report with a bot? Absolutely, you can, and we have. You know, can you do it with a BPM tool? Yep. If you do it with both, it's probably going to be a much better process, right? Much easier to maintain, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, those are the enterprise level kind of processes that you want to stay at the corporate level within the COE, because you're going to have a lot of maintenance and you'll always have a lot of tweaks to those. All right. So we talked about change management a little bit earlier last week. It's really important. I think this is one of the things that are overlooked a lot, because people are scared that automation is going to take their job. And in 90 to 95% of the cases, I would say that is not true, right? People are not writing bots, and you know, they're certainly looking to reduce cost, but the cost is not through employees. They've already spent money on their employees, right? So they don't want to lose the training and all the things they do. So they want those people to go up and be able to take higher level jobs. They get, from a productivity standpoint, they get higher productivity for the dollar. They get, you know, a sustainable, engaged workforce that's producing more, right? And then they get lower cost per transactions. That's why they're doing RPA. And so, but most people don't look at that organizational change management and explain and communicate and make sure that the front line, because if you get the front line involved in it, they don't want to do manual tasks. They don't want to do tedious things. They would love to offshoot them. But to do that, you've got to give them enough comfort and enough understanding of where the organization is going to go and what their role is going to be in the organization, or they're going to be very resistant and they'll never give you the ideas, and hence your funnel will continue to struggle. Did you want to add anything to that, Val?
Yeah, to me, I would say that I've seen across companies that sometimes this rewards program, it's also part of a change management plan, because that will keep your employees motivated, and as they start seeing that the automations are not actually taking their jobs but improving their jobs, and on top of that, I will get, you know, a recognition if I work on that. They'll just keep you know, the engagement high and happier, and it's just an amazing transformation with companies, and honestly it's very different when a company has a change management plan in place focused on employees, and when a company does not have that. It's very different responses that I've seen in my experience. So yeah, I wanted to add that.
No, it's great input. Thank you. Stay. Don't give up because it's hard time consuming. The reason that 85% of the people only have 8 to 10 bots, as I said, one of them is because of lack of imagination about how to apply RPA, or from an organizational level. And then I think the second thing is because at some point it got hard and somebody said, hey, this is taking a lot of time from me. Or hey, in the case of mortgages right now, hey, we want to, you know, I've got several companies who want to do a lot of work in mortgages, but they can't because they're producing so much income from their people that they don't want to right now, that they don't want to disrupt the business operation. And hey, I get that, you know, when you're making revenue, it's hard to take time to do that. You know, I think with RPA, typically you can get implementations done in 6 to 8 weeks. So I don't think it's that much time, and they would get a bunch of returns. So I think it's a little bit of short-sighted in some cases, but it's certainly a valid purpose. But at some point, whatever happened, because it was time-consuming or it was hard or it was difficult, companies they hit that first wall and they stop. And the ones that have had really the most success with RPA are the ones who broke down that wall and kept going, and they might have got to a second wall and they broke down that wall. And again, it goes back to what I said on number one. The reason that they got through that wall is because they had a strong executive sponsor saying, I don't care. We are going to move ahead. This is what we're going to do. And I think that's what it takes to really get an RPA at scale. And then we talked about the last one, communicating and scheduled implementation and success along the journey. We talked about that a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. When you're doing this at a large enterprise global way, being able to tell people when they can expect and what they can expect, or what they can expect and when they can expect it, I think is a key factor. All right. So how do we do it? And this is the last slide, guys, and then we're going to show you the dashboard, and then we'll end it there. But I'll try to go as quickly as I can through this. I want to make sure we're on time. So I think as we said, the first thing you got to do is find a sponsor or champion. Whether you do bottom up or top down, if you're at a divisional level and you've got 3 or 4 bots and you think the company should be doing it, telling your comrades is one thing, and that's great. You can tweak or you can kind of get a few here and there. But if you're really going to do scale, again, it's got to be driven by the executive sponsor, and so it's got to be the first goal or the first thing you look for. And I recommend to a VP yesterday, the VP that we're working with, and he's saying, hey, I want to get this to corporate. Let's create a plan to do that. First thing I did said, great, who's sponsoring it? Like, we need to go find that first, and then we can go create a plan, because a plan without a sponsor is worthless. So then I think we need to do the COE and set standards. We talked about the importance of a COE and creating those standards and making sure that you have authority on that. Then you set the overall target goals. Why do you do it? And it's a top-down approach. So let's say we're GE. We have 8 divisions. Within those 8 divisions, we have multiple companies. Within those companies, we each have multiple functions. We want to say, hey, we're going to cut 8% across GE of SG&A over the next 3 years. And so how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing you do is you set that 8% up. In some places, just set 8% across, like everybody's responsible for 8%. And then, but however you do it, you set a target, a high goal, and then you come back and you communicate that to divisions. You got to communicate what we're doing, what the initiative is, what the goal is overall, and what their part in that goal is. And then you need to communicate and explain, here's the COE. And they're going to be the guys who are going to sit down with you, or girls, to sit down with you and talk to you about what processes you need to automate to get to that goal. Now, we'll talk about it a little bit later. You're going to adjust that at some point, but you need a good starting point to go start having communications with the different departments and divisions and groups. So then you want to have. So the next part is education system, and this is for large organizations. The larger you are, the longer this is going to take. You need to really kind of find those champions we talked about. And so how do you do that? Well, you kind of start showing demos. You have sample use cases already ready to go. You give them training. You do workshops with them, right? And so the next period of time is really trying to get everybody familiar with RPA enough that you can go have workshops with them and start creating use cases, which is the next thing you want to do. So the next thing you want to do, there's a spreadsheet we have. Val, if you have that up, you can show that when you do the dashboard. But in those spreadsheets, basically you ask 4 or 5 questions to say, hey, is this a good RPA candidate? And then you ask another 4 or 5 questions that says, hey, do we think we're going to get the return that would justify spending time on this? Very quickly, you can come up with a score. So all the departments will list all of their use cases row by row, answer the questions, and they'll come up with a score. At least that's a starting point to have a conversation, right? Then you hold individual workshops with them where you kind of go into more detail, and you start narrowing that down to a list of 10, 15 per department, maybe 10, top 10, and then you want to do a feasibility study on those top 10. and actually go in, you record the people working, you see what they're doing, you ask questions, you do an as is, to be state, and then you can predict how much hours you're going to save. And then and I recommend you just use hardcore hours, and then at whatever rate, the client, our client gives us to calculate ROI. I don't try to do management time and facility time and rent and none of that really, all that clutters the real ROI. And with RPA, you're going to get plenty of ROI. You don't need to clutter it. So just use hard hours saved, the weighted dollar, and that's what you're saving as far as time. And then you can figure out your ROI from that. Now, as you do that at a departmental level, you need to then, there are some, so you don't always just prioritize by the highest return. How easy is it going to implement? How much time does it going to have? What, how many different integration points is it going to have, right? All of these things, come up, are there going to be contingencies? You got to do one before you do another one, right? So what you want to do is after you've made the kind of feasibility, you want to set down and create, if you will, a departmental roadmap. What's the prioritization list, and when would you like to get these implemented? What's the kind of schedule? You then take that prioritization level and schedule, and you combine them at a corporate level. Not everybody's going to get what they want, right? And that's why you need an option for them to do it faster if they want to out of their own budget, right? And you come up with a 2 to 3 year roadmap by department, by groups, etc. So that everybody knows where they're slotted in line, right? Then you want to, reset the corporate targets, because you've learned so much different from departments. Some departments are going to get more, some departments are going to get less, and then you can kind of tweak that first estimate of the targeted goals to set the final goal. Then communicate that out and communicate that with the schedule, right? And then, and going back to, it's always a hybrid approach. You never want to start with everybody at once, right? Start with one division, one department, group, get some wins, communicate those wins, measure those wins, let everybody know about those wins, and then you can kind of slowly build up the scale as you go. So, and again, as I said before, make sure that the organizational change management is communicated in advance. All right, so I think that's our for the talking part, I think that's kind of the approach. I hope it was helpful. We do want to show you, a dashboard that we've helped to, we built to help with this process. And I'm going to turn it over to V now. Why do you want a dashboard? Well, the first thing is to clarify the goals you've been established, right? People need to understand that this is a serious initiative with serious backing from a senior level executive, and they're going to measure this. Is, they're not just talking about it, they're actually going to set targets, and they're going to measure those targets and your performance against those targets. Once you have that, you've got people's attention, right? And then you define how the process will be measured, right? Everybody needs to understand that. So the dashboard will kind of help set up how this will be measured. So for every process you automate, you have to think about how it's going to report back to the dashboard. So it will make you think through not just the automation, but how the automation is going to be measured. And then it certainly communicates the successes across the organization. It provides accountability. As you're communicating that, don't think that the business owners aren't going to be very cognizant about how they're going against their targets, about how their competitors or their peers are also performing, right? Which gives them accountability, but it also gives them a drive to do more, which is what you're trying to do at an organizational level. So with that being said, why don't you take it over from here, Beth? I'll stop sharing. All right. I think I'm going to stop sharing here in a second.
I think I'm sharing now.
All right, good. Yep. Why don't you make it to full screen if you can?
Yeah. Can you see there?
Yep.
Okay. So first, I wanted to show you the Excel file that we use to do the feasibility studies. So basically here what we want is to collect information from the process, like high level description, who's doing the process, how many persons, the average time that they spend on the process, what's the blended rate, process frequency. The whole purpose of this information is at the end being able to assess the benefit that we're going to deliver for that specific process. And then of course, if there are additional soft benefits or even hard savings or quantifiable benefits you want to add to this. This is one of the tools that we use to do this feasibility that Tommy was referencing before. And this is the dashboards that we've put together. So basically this dashboard tells you at a company level how we're doing, what's the value that the RPA is delivering against the initial targets that we had. Here we have the ROI company-wide, cost savings, hours saved, and some process metrics. Also, for this specific scenario, our company has 4 different divisions. I could, filter the whole dashboard by just clicking at corporate and taking a look at what we're doing in corporate right here. So at this point, we're touching 2 different areas or departments. One is HR, the other is mergers and acquisitions. In here, this table tells us the ROI, the current ROI that we're getting from that process. This is in real time. So as Tommy was saying before, every time the RPA runs, it reports to the dashboard, and then the dashboard it's updated on a frequently basis. Now here we have the actual cost savings that we're delivering. Here we can see that we're somehow below our initial target. And if we wanted to go back and see the whole company, we can just click out and then it'll show me the whole details. Here we have also the cost savings per month. We've seen that, it increases month per month. And if I wanted to maybe also filter for different divisions, I have some drop downs here, some options here, or if I wanted to see specific company, that's also something that we can do. And the whole dashboard would be updated. So right here at this point, as I said, this company has 4 different divisions, and under divisions we have, under security we have 1 company, and we're working on HR and finance. Professional services, we have 1 company focusing on HR. I'm sorry, 2 companies, 1 focusing on HR, finance, accounting, and HR for the other one. And for oil and gas, we have 1 company. We're currently working in 3 different departments. But let's say that I wanted to do, like, this is the overall numbers for, financial perspective, general perspective of the company. But if I wanted to drill down to a specific process or a specific department, I could just go to operational details, and then the dashboard will automatically show me what are we doing under HR for that specific company. So here we have also details like hours saved, average time that we're spending on per transaction. Of course, a transaction, the concept of transaction would need to be defined previously with the process owner. What does a transaction means, right? For you, a transaction might be an invoice process, or it might be a report created, or things like that. The transaction would need to be defined. And these, we have also here the transactions that have been processed and the success rate. So from here, we could kind of tell, okay, we're doing good in this one, but if we were, below our targeted savings, we could take a look at the success rate and kind of, think back, what are we doing wrong? Are we feeding the wrong information to the bot? What's happening? How can we tweak the process and improve it a little bit? And if we wanted to come back or just see on a detail or on a process level how the company is doing, we could just have this view right here. For example, if I wanted to go to professional services, this will show me only professional services. Or if I wanted to go back and see how is accounts receivable or how is finance and accounting across the whole company, which is another perspective that we might need to have. How is finance and accounting doing, then we will have the numbers, and these numbers include all divisions, all companies, right? So if I
So
want to go back,
let me just
yeah.
conceptualize here real quick. So the idea behind this is, if you're talking to, I use GE being probably an extreme example on the large side. I think they have 8 divisions or something to that. They used to have 8 divisions. So they might have power, they might have healthcare, et cetera. Within that, they have, lots and lots of companies. And then within those companies, you have, departments, right? So you may want to look across AP across all of them to see what kind of return you have, automating AP versus the return you have on, onboarding HR, right? So
Mhm.
we built this so that you could look at it by process across all of the different departments and kind of roll up from from accounting department to company to division and to corporate. Um, or you may want to look at it an individual division and just look at that and see how the different companies are doing it. Or you may want to drill down in a company and find out why one company's, 50% of their go and some other company's 150% of their go. So, and so we tried to give this to where you have drill down at the corporate level, at the division level, at the company level, and then at the function level. And then at the process level underneath function. So you may want to look at all accounting across all of that, or you may want to look just specifically at AP across all companies and divisions. So, this is fairly early. This is phase 1 of this dashboard. Over the next few months, we're going to greatly improve this. It's very helpful now. But I think, and then where we're going to get down is the process level. For every process we do, we're going to have an integration point API into this, where we talk about how every time a transaction happens, we're calculating how much how much we're saving per transaction, right? And so you can go to any process. Let's say you went to, healthcare division and you went to company X, and you're looking at AP, what your cost per AP was. So you could be able to drill down to that AP level and actually see how many transactions that have occurred, what the transaction times are, what the error rates are going to be, all the details about that process at a process level. So but where it really, really helps now is for companies who want to get started with RPA, it helps them start setting, break down their target. In other words, like we said, you may want to set a 5% or an 8% or a 10% go, but you can either do it level across all departments and all divisions, companies, and departments, or you can actually go in and actually set that goal for each one of them, depending on what you've uncovered, the discovery phase. So for CIOs or CEOs or CFOs or COOs, for the executive in charge, it gives them the ability to set a target and then measure that target over time to see and communicate the effectiveness of the program. So I think that's kind of it in summary. We have 6 minutes, so why don't we jump to questions unless there's one other thing you want to show anything else about?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that at Apple this point we have added like the capacity of retarget your savings. So if for example you wanted to see company one, and just maybe tweak the savings a little bit because maybe the old goals do not make sense anymore. We have this capability right now, and then we're working on the separate layout where you could put your new goals and your new savings for all your companies and all the divisions. So that's really helpful. You would be able to have both options. Like if you wanted to see like the immediate numbers, like if you wanted to target for the 20%, how the numbers would be, you would have the capability within the dashboard. But if you wanted to have a meeting, discuss that, and set the goals separately on the layout that we're building, that layout will reflect those changes right here. And I think it's pretty cool to keep track of how RPA is impacting all the company in a high level and detail level.
Very nice, very nice. So this is great. So do we have a link that we can share with people, just to kind of have them
Yeah,
to
sure. Yeah. Yeah,
without tearing up our tearing up the
I have
deal?
a public link. Yeah, I can share that. Sure.
All right, let's get that out. I actually want to show it to a couple of clients myself. All right. So any questions? Ted, is there any questions come up?
No, guys, don't see questions.
Well, either we're doing a great job, Val, or we're boring the hell out of everybody. So I appreciate everybody's time and attendance, and we look forward to seeing you next week. What's on store for next week? All right, upcoming webinars, organizational readiness and the different delivery models for RPA. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Specifically, I'm going to talk about vendors specifically, but it could be also internal as well too. And then I think the last one we're going to talk about the industry catalog. This is really going to be Val's game. She works a lot with industry values and how does catalogs, the concept of catalogs, accelerate bot value. And by the way, I'm very interested in finding partners, companies that we will invest in for very little money. We will build out a catalog for you as long as you are okay with me taking that, making copies of it, and basically selling it to other clients. And if that's so, the first client in any industry or function that we do that for, I will basically drop our cost about 25. We will drop our cost to 25%. So there'll be about 75 saving off our normal rates to go out and build that. Basically, I just want to cover some of our costs. And so, if you're a company that's thinking about RPA in a specific area, like supply chain or HR functionality, or you're an oil and gas company and you're interested in it, either by sector or by function, if we don't already have a cornerstone client, we will absolutely work with you to become that client for us, and it's a win-win for everybody. Did we have a question? I saw my teams kind of flashing. I don't know if that's one of our guys or if that's any other question came in.
I think that was me sharing the public link of the dashboard.
Perfect. Good. All right. Well, then have a great week, and we look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you.